For quite a while now, I've had this idea brewing for a series of collaborative videos with other outdoor backpacking YouTube creators. I love the idea of community over competition. I don't see other channels in my niche as my competition. They're my community, they're my friends. And in that spirit, I wanted to create a series of collaborative videos. This is the first of what I hope become many, many of these videos. In this video, I work with my good friend Kalman, better known as Ghost Mule, who runs the Everyday Backpacker YouTube channel. And the idea behind this video is that we ask each other 3 questions. So it's sort of this back and forth interview between the two of us where we get to know each other a little bit better. You, the viewer, get to know the two of us a little bit better. And it was super fun to do. I'm really excited about it. I'm happy with how it turned out, and I'm very excited to share it with you. And again, I hope this is just one of many. All right, here we are, the first of what I hope will be a series of 3 questions for another backpacking YouTuber. You are in Montana. I'm in Reno. How are things going for you in Montana this week?
Well, it's going pretty good right now, but we're staring down the barrel of our own little winter storm. Probably not quite as bad as the one you just recently went through, but we're expecting a couple of feet of accumulation here soon. So could be very interesting. We're getting our skis waxed up and getting ready for the winter fun. How are things there?
Nice. Yeah. It's been a little wild here. 2 or 3 weekends in a row now, we've been hit with pretty massive storms. And it's frustrating because during the week, the weather has been pretty nice, like nice enough to get out and do some snowshoeing or some outdoor activity. But it's as soon as the weekend rolls around, we're just hammered. Like last weekend, we had massive windstorm. Like they were registering wind chills down to -30 Fahrenheit. And the highest gust we had was at the Kirkwood Ski Resort. It was 162 miles an hour.
Holy crap, that's hurricane strength.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's like, oh, I got all my snowshoeing gear out. I'm ready to go. And then nothing. So
not today. Nature's calling.
Yeah, it's been kind of wild, but I think a lot of that is kind of where this idea was born too, is just to try to keep some YouTube content flowing and have a little collaboration and work together. So you and I kind of came up with this idea of 3 questions. So let's just kind of dive right into it. The way we're gonna work this is kind of a round. Basically, I'll ask a question, Ghost Mule will ask a question, I'll ask my second one, so on and so forth. So for my first question, if money were absolutely no object and was not a barrier whatsoever, what is one piece of gear you would absolutely add to your backpacking kit today?
Well, I don't know. Can I pick something that I actually found out I'm getting today?
I mean, you can. That seems a little less fun.
Well, it's true. Well, yeah. So my new piece of gear, I just got a proof of life photo from our buddy Devin over at Waymark Gear. My Waymark 50 liter light is done and on its way. So that was going to be my answer before I ordered it. But yeah, it's hard. That's a hard one for me because I actually have a pretty good setup for myself right now. But man, if I had to pick one thing and money didn't count, I thought a lot about it, and I think maybe I would like to try out the pro version of my new tent, which is the Durston X-Mid 2 Pro. So I think that would be a lot of fun. I went with the X-Mid 2, mainly for price reasons. But yeah, if money was not an object, I think I would really like to see how that tent works out, because I see it in your videos and Devin's videos, and I get a little jealous.
Yeah, so 2 of my friends now have the Pro. Devin, who I hiked with in Utah, and then my main hiking partner here, Brian, both have the Pro. I have just the regular X-Mid 2P, and at first I was just like, it's not that different. You don't really, yes, it's a big weight savings. It's a huge weight savings. I'm not an ultralight hiker. I'm not really an ounce counter, but boy, that's a nice shelter.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're really good at justifying the gear choices that we make in a lot of ways, but I think secretly everybody covets a little bit that extra little pizzazz that you get with certain pieces of gear. So, you know, we all act like, yeah, I got the best gear ever, but in reality, there's always something better out there.
Yeah, and that's you can't discount the idea of gear envy too. I actually did a whole video on not succumbing to gear envy and picking the thing that's right for you and not worrying about what hiker A has or hiker B has, but all of us do it. I think every single one of us to some degree falls victim to gear envy. And as silly as it sounds, because I have the X-Mid 2P, it's a great tent. I still every once in a while I'm like, man, I should just drop the money on that pro. But I think instead of getting another Durston tent, I'm going to get a different tent that's in that same price range that offers maybe some different features since I already have the 2P.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. But there's definitely different tents for different purposes and different things. I'm just excited to try out that new tent because I've gotten the chance to play around with it, and it's just like eating away at me. And like March can't come fast enough. I hopefully am going to get out here soon and play around with it. So that's the double edged sword of getting new gear. Is it's like really nice to have it, but then you're like, shit, I can't use it.
Right. Um, I can tell you from experience that tent performs wonderfully in the snow. So just throwing that out there since you are in Montana and about to get a big snowstorm.
Well, hopefully, by the time I get out to go do something, the area we're looking to go in is in the rain shadow of the bear tooth. So hopefully there won't be too much snow there. We'll have to pack our,
Nice.
but small price to pay.
Right. For sure. For sure. All right. On to your question number one.
All right, so I'm going to go down a little bit of a different path here. So I'm going to get a little on the philosophical side. I hope you bear with me here. So when we head out into the trail, not only do we bring a pack of our gear, but we also carry a bag full of a lifetime of experiences. You've shared how your acts on the trail shaped your recent experiences, but I'm curious if there are any other ways. There are ways that your other life experiences, positive or negative, have shaped your outdoor experience.
So you sent me the list of questions quite a while ago, and I spent some time with this one and went back and forth on how I was going to answer this one. And I think the best way, one of the things that I think is lacking a lot on YouTube or social media just in general, is just that real human personal experience. And that's something that I definitely want to add more of into my videos. So I may as well start right now. Growing up as a young kid, I was the youngest of four siblings by a very wide margin. My two older brothers were like in high school by the time I was born,
Oh wow!
and my sister was, I think my sister's like 10 years older than me or something like that, 9 or 10 years older than me. So I didn't have a lot of interaction with my siblings growing up, obviously. And the neighborhood we lived in didn't have a lot of kids my age. So I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a great deal of time just by myself, entertaining myself. And I think growing up that way, growing up as kind of the weird, lonely kid, really prepared me for backpacking, because especially solo backpacking, because I think so much of our life is tied around our interactions with other people. And I think at times on the trail, you can get very lonely. It can be weird, especially if you're out multiple days. Like I've gone 48 hours at a time on the trail without talking to anyone but my camera, like not seeing another human being, because I backpack in a lot of really remote and hard to get to places. I don't typically go to like the touristy trap areas or the really, heavily trafficked trails, I'm always, if I'm looking on all trails, I'm looking at, least trafficked is the filter that I always hit. And so a good example of that is I did the Ruby Crest Trail solo, and the third day of 5 was when I saw the first other human being.
Wow.
And I think for a lot of people that would be a real struggle. That would be maybe even a drawback to solo hiking, is just that loneliness and that solitude. And I think to a degree, we're all looking for kind of a manufactured solitude when we're backpacking, solitude with a buddy, solitude with a couple of buddies.
Mm.
But to really embrace that actual, like, complete and total loneliness, or complete solitude where you're just all by yourself out in the wilderness, is challenging. And I think growing up the way that I did kind of set me up for success in that aspect of backpacking, where it's not as big of a deal for me to not talk to somebody for 24 to 48 hours at a time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think especially nowadays, our society is so geared towards interaction. We have technology like we're using right now to be able to contact people like at any time, and even growing up in the '90s and stuff, that was still not a thing. And so, I think as society tends to push us more closer together. Some of us have that internal innate need to kind of to pull away from that. And I think it's always interesting to me when I take like a new person out and they experience that for the first time, and they almost get this like anxiety build up because they're like, oh, there's nothing around me. Eventually it's really cool to see them kind of embrace that, because I always jokingly tell people, when you first get out there, you'll realize just how deafening the silence out there really is, because we're so programmed into that. So I think it's really cool that you had that experience kind of growing up that kind of made it more comfortable to transition into that, kind of that sense of being, a little speck out there on your own. So uh, it's really cool how even things you wouldn't think of will shape your experience in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's funny that you mention, technology and taking new people out and things like that, because over the summer I took one of my best friends out on his very first backpacking trip. It was a group trip. There was 4 of us, and we were visiting this really remote part in the backcountry of Yosemite. And it was a 4-day trip, and there were 2 days where we were the only 4 people that we saw. And the whole time we were out there, he was kind of, I don't want to say stressed, but fretting maybe a little bit, because like, oh, I don't have any cell signal. I don't. And I'm like, yeah, and you're not gonna
Yeah.
for like the next 4. Just turn that thing off, man. Like
Just
that's effectively a camera at this point. Like, no one can. And it was interesting because it's just before COVID happened, and just before all, like, everything got shut down, and even like hiking areas were shut down and trailheads were shut down and things like that. I had, for some reason or another, I turned the ringer off on my phone, and I have not turned it back on. My ringer on my phone has effectively been off for 2.5 years, and it's awesome. I highly recommend it. And it was so funny. Like my goal when I go out back into the backcountry is to find that spot where I have no bars, where my phone says no signal. And it was just so funny to watch someone who was new to it be like, I have no signal. Like, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, you just look, all of this, like, enjoy where you are, put that thing away, turn it off. Don't even think about it. And it's interesting how tethered we become to little devices and technology and conveniences. And that's why one of the things I love about backpacking is just having that opportunity to be severed from all of that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the newbies will learn, young Padawans. Um, But yeah, for me, one of my absolute favorite parts of the trip is that moment where I can switch my phone over into airplane. And I don't turn my phone off because I'm sure, like you, I use it for a lot of things, such as a camera and other things. But being able to switch it off, and I'll actually do it even before we hit the signal loss, because it's like, you know what, done. And it's so freeing. Even though you may threat until you get there, but once you do it, it's just so amazing to be able to have that experience, to be separated. And another thing I was thinking while you were talking, and I apologize, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but what I love is that we have in the community of backpacking the ability to kind of have our own little experience and separate ourselves from the rest of the world. But then when we go back into the community and we do things like this, we can all share those shared experiences, and everybody immediately is like, oh, yeah, yeah, I know what he's talking about. And so, even though it is a separate experience, it's a shared experience within the community. And I think that's really cool. And that's, the part of the backpacking community that I really dig.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been, I don't want to use the word exploiting, but I've been exploring that exact thing recently with some of my shorts and some TikTok videos where I'm stitching together like B-roll and stuff of a lot of my past trips that I just have stored on my hard drive, just hours upon hours upon hours of footage from hikes, and just like doing little voiceovers about things that I know every backpacker is going to be able to relate to. And it's been super fun to see the reactions that people get. And you're right, there is this kind of universal shared experience, even though, you and I have never hiked together, even though we're friends. We've never had the opportunity to be in the backcountry together. But I know that there are key phrases I could say about backpacking, and immediately you'd go, yep, been there, done that.
Yeah, every time one of those shorts come out, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that's good. Also, knowing that on the interwebs, there's going to be a vast number of people that are going to look at that and go, "The hell's he talking about?" But then there's going to be those other ones that are like, "Ah, yeah, I know that one."
Yeah, it's been kind of fun. There's a couple of through hikers that I follow, um, whose content I really enjoy, and almost all of them now have commented in one way or another on one of those shorts, and I'm like, see, you get it, you're part of the club.
Yeah, you were in, sir. All right.
All
That was a
right,
good answer.
second question. Um, because you and I are friends in the real world, you were a guest on my podcast at one point. I know that at one point in your life you were a firefighter.
Mhm.
I'm curious to know how much of that professional training that you got going through, becoming a firefighter as a career, how much of that translates into how you backpack or how you manage, stress and things like that in the backcountry.
Yeah, so I love this question. And yeah, I was a firefighter and a paramedic for 10 years. And when I was thinking about answering this, I was like, well, the low hanging fruit, I mean, the paramedic, the medical skills, I mean, I can put a band aid on like nobody's business. I can treat no one's, uh, you know, I can do that stuff in my sleep. And so, but that's, something that I think, a lot of people are able to do. And the other interesting thing, though, that I think I really kind of focused on when I thought about the question was the idea of risk benefit analysis. So that's something that we learn quite a bit in the fire service is are the potential ends going to justify the means? So is your reward going to substantiate the risk? You don't want to kill a bunch of firefighters unnecessarily. And so I think in the backcountry, that is one of those things where, I've talked about on my channel before about what I call the magazine test. And for me, even though that magazine test was created in an outdoor experience, it was brought about by my experience as an emergency responder. And that was the idea of looking at the situation I'm in, assessing the risk versus the benefit, and deciding whether or not it's a good thing to move forward. And so, constantly doing that evaluation. And um, I think like most people, when I was younger, I made a lot of really dumb mistakes and things that could have ended very badly or just plain ended me in the backcountry. And I think as I got older, but also kind of incorporated some of that training in, I was able to look at things a little bit more objective. And it sucks because oftentimes if I'm in a group of people, And I typically hike with a lot of people that are younger than I am. They're all like gung ho, and then I'm in the back like, "Hey guys, maybe we ought to think about this for a second." And a good example of that was when we were up in the crazies and we got hit by that snow and windstorm. And I said as we were going up, I said, "Hey guys, I just want to open the dialogue. I'm not saying we need to turn around, but I'm thinking, my little light is flashing here and saying, hey, this is potentially a bad situation." And they were like, "Oh no, we got it, it's fine." And then we continued on, and I was more and more, I was thinking, I don't know, this is sketch. And then, of course, my buddy's tent blew out of the ground, and we all scrambled to find all of his underwear and stuff. And it was at that point, it was like, "All right, pack up your shit, we're going down." And had we kind of assessed a little bit more. But also, I think having been able to open that dialogue, it definitely had that thought process, and so we were able to make that decision a little bit faster. So I think for me that a big part of it is, I'm constantly reassessing how I approach the thing, and deciding whether that the risk is going to outweigh the reward. Like I said with the magazine test, I'm thinking to myself, if you are in a situation and you're thinking to yourself, I've read this magazine article before, it didn't end very well for that guy, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and remove yourself from the situation. And I have, on several tapes. I've also, moved forward and had really good experiences because of that. But yeah, I think that was a big part of that, was just being able to look at a situation, and you're constantly kind of taking that assessment in. And so I've been able to avoid a lot of unnecessarily sketchy or dangerous things. Not to say that I haven't pushed that envelope just a hair, because let's face it, when you run into burning buildings for a living, you got a little bit of an adrenaline rush thing going there. Um, and so that definitely, I think, played a big part in it. I was trying to think if there was any other really things. Um, it's definitely made me respect fire a lot more. So, a lot of people are really surprised when they find out that the majority of the time I'm in the backcountry, I don't have a campfire. And I keep telling people, like, believe it or not, you can still have fun on a camp without a campfire. It's not a requirement. But being able to see the effects of how quickly a brush fire can spread, and how important that is, I think that's definitely another tool that's been very beneficial. Um, Trying to think if there's anything else. The ironic thing is that the other side of backpack, or the other side of firefighting, is what pushed me more into backpacking, which of course was the mental trauma that I also received from that. So the training definitely prepared me, and the experience in its own right actually um, made me more interested in it for my own healing. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but so it was
Yeah,
definitely
definitely.
um, but it's certainly the tools that I learned in that job certainly don't hurt. The other thing is that in situations where it is a little bit beyond the point of safe, and things are definitely a little bit more emergency bound, um, I may get really overly stressed out if I'm trying to figure out my taxes, but the moment the shit hits the fan in any kind of emergency situation, my heart rate will actually drop. So
Interesting.
that's another very interesting aspect of, for me, I actually have over many years kind of developed a sense of clarity. So it's very easy for me in that emergency situation to say, okay, we'll figure this out. Um, so that's also pretty beneficial. But fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had to really utilize that one as much.
One of the things you touched on that I think is super important for every backpacker to learn, and every just anyone who ventures into the outdoors in general, is that risk management. That risk versus reward, and I think in backpacking, like in other things in life, the ego kind of takes over. If you've got a specific trip planned, or you've got a specific amount of mileage planned, or you've got a specific peak in mind that you want to summit, it's really easy to be like, oh, I have to reach the summit. I have to make my miles. I have to. And it's really valuable to learn where those boundaries are and where safety takes precedent over success, because by and large, the trail's not going anywhere. If you go out and you try to summit Mount Whitney and there's a thunderstorm, which is a situation I've actually been in, we were doing the Mountaineers route and we got up to Lower Boy Scout Lake and there were like nickel sized drops of hail and lightning all over the place. And we'd actually just seen another hiker get taken out by helicopter. And we just decided, you know what? This is not the trip we summit. This is the trip we camp at Lower Boy Scout Lake. And I think that we could have very easily made the wrong decision there. We could have decided, you know what? We're pushing on. We're going to summit. We're going to do this, and ended up leaving in helicopters ourselves. But I think it's a really valuable tool, and it's cool that you learned that in a professional setting, that you already go into backpacking with this preset mind of risk management and safety concerns. I think that's something every backpacker needs to know.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. If there are some supersized egos in the fire service, and I think you kind of have to have a little bit of that in order to do that job. And they're really good. I was also an instructor, and one of the things that we really focus on is really kind of breaking people of that, and you almost have to scare them into that humbleness to be able to say, look, all the movies and everything you've seen about firefighting make you think this is, like this job is not that, and this is what you need to focus on. And I think the other thing that it is different in that I see a lot of people today. They're like, oh yeah, we talked about the threats, and I was like, okay, when was the last time you talked about the threats? Oh, well, we did that when we were planning a trip. Did you do it any time other than that? No, just then. It's we got our threat assessment. I'm like, the fire service teaches you that every situation you go into is incredibly dynamic, and it's very true of backpacking too. And that threat assessment almost needs to be done like 15-minute increments, because things can change very quickly. A hailstorm can move in, the wind can pick up, Jim can slide down an ice sluice. And those are the moments when that original threat assessment, that shit's gone. And so I think for me, it's just that quiet thought process that constantly is evaluating the situation. And I'm not going to say that I'm perfect in that, you do miss things. But if you're constantly thinking about the situation around you, one, you actually notice more around you than you don't. It kind of gets you out of the headspace. But at the same time, you're able to kind of answer those changes a little quicker.
Yeah, definitely. On a recent trip, my buddy Brian and we went to Bears Lake Basin, and it's actually an area we're going to revisit this year. We just pulled our permit, and I'm really excited about it. But while we were on that trip, we had kind of done our pre-trip planning. We'd looked at all the weather reports. We'd mapped out the terrain. We had 2 or 3 different options. It's an area where there are no trails, so it's kind of a choose your own adventure. And we had set it up to where there were 3 possible exits that we could take based on, weather conditions or trail conditions or just our physical condition at the time. And both of us, before we left, made the decision to leave our rain jackets behind because the weather was just it was clear. It was clear for days and days and days and days. And noon, every single day we were out at noon, thunderheads rolled in.
Oh shit.
And we're both just sitting there going, really? We saved 6 ounces by leaving our rain jackets. It was the dumbest thing I could have done. And we both did it just literally to save weight in our packs, a negligible amount of weight. And it was just one of those things, the whole trip, it was just looming over us okay, here come those clouds. Is this going to be the day they open up? And thankfully they never did. We never got any rain, but it was just one of those things in the back of my mind. And I tell you what, Like I will never leave my rain jacket behind again. I don't care what the weather report says.
We've all been there. Every backpacker has had that story form, and we've all learned the hard way, and experience is the most bitter of teachers. So,
Absolutely. All right. I think we've covered that one pretty well.
yeah.
On to your second question.
All right. So I think growing up, you and I had very similar experiences with family camping and the outdoors, and a little bit different type of setting than what we currently do. But I went into backpacking as a hobby in my late teens and early 20s. Can you share how starting backpacking later in life shaped your goals and experience as a backpacker?
Yeah, definitely. I really like this question too. Um, so yeah, I grew up car camping and stuff like that. Pretty primitive car camping with my parents. But I didn't really go on my very first backpacking trip until 2014. So I was late 20s, early 30s before I started backpacking. And I think one of the major differences between starting late in life as I did and a lot of the people that I see on YouTube and on Instagram and on TikTok who are starting, in their teens and 20s is that for a lot of people who are getting into backpacking very, very young, through hiking is the end goal. So everything is working up to, you're going, oh, I'm going to go on this overnight trip, then I'm going to go on this multi-night trip, and then I'm going to do the PCT, or I'm going to do the JMT, or I'm going to do the CDT. And I don't have any illusion that I'm ever going to be a through hiker because I'm married, I'm a homeowner, I have a job, like a full-time job. I can't just take 6 months out of my life off. And as much as I would love to do that, like it's a fantasy that lives in the back of my head is that, oh, someday I'll do the PCT. And I've section hiked a huge chunk of it. I've got probably 800 miles done section hiking. But the idea of actually like taking 6 months out of my life and doing it is pretty much off the table. And so I think that is one of the main differences between getting a later start in this hobby than starting in your teens and your early 20s. And I think it's great. Honestly, I think it takes a lot of the pressure off, because it's like doing a through hike is a massive undertaking. That's the financial considerations, the time considerations, the physical considerations, and for that to be your end goal is it's just huge. I can't even imagine applying that amount of like stress to something that I love doing.
Mm.
And so it's kind of nice to just be able to go, yeah, I'm probably never going to be a through hiker. And that's great. That's fine because through hiking doesn't have to be the be all end all of backpacking. Like weekend warrior is a completely legitimate way to backpack. Section hiking is a completely legitimate way to backpack. And so it's kind of nice just to be able to enjoy backpacking on my own terms and not have to worry about, answering the question consistently. Oh, well, if you do the PCT, are you going to do the other two? Are you going to be a triple crowner? Are you going to do this? And like, no, man, I'm just going to go out from like Friday to Sunday and then go to work.
Stop pushing me, man.
Yeah.
No, that is a great answer. When I asked the question, I had no real preconceived notion, but that was like definitely a thought process that I hadn't considered. But the moment you said it, I completely understood where you're coming from. And it's interesting because my hiking mentor, and he hates it when I say this, but my hiking mentor, Jay, he has done the Appalachian Trail and the PCT. And he also does a lot of weekend trips. And he put it the best way for me because I'm not a through hiker either yet. Maybe, who knows? Um, I have aspirations. But he said, when I was through hiking, backpacking became my job. It's what I did for a living during that time. A weekend trip is a vacation. And so that different thought process that I think only maybe somebody who's done both can really kind of completely appreciate. But like, he's like, you get to the point where on the trail where it's again, like you said, you have so much pressure, you're trying to make deadlines. He's like, you don't really even get a chance to slow down and enjoy it. It's just a different type of experience. And I think that's the best way that we need to look at it. I think gets missed is that um, it's just a different experience. It's not one's better than the other. It's just they're different,
Yeah.
and both of them are legitimate forms of enjoying this hobby. And so, I think most people in the community kind of understand that. I've only run into a few occasions where somebody like legitimately was like, "Oh, well, you only go for backpacking trips on the weekend. You don't know what you're talking about." It exists, but I think by and large, most people are like, "Yeah, I get it." It's a similar experience.
So just kind of anecdotally, um, I interact with a lot of through hikers through social media and just through people that I know in my life who have done these things. And by and large, I have found the people who have that kind of judgmental attitude that, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, have yet to actually through hike. They're consistently planning a through hike, but they've never done it. And actual through hikers that are people that I know personally have been like the most supportive and just wonderful people. Like, like when I'm out section hiking the PCT, I run into through hikers every day. I live very near the Sierras, so I'm hitting people who have walked almost half of the PCT, and we get to talking. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just out section hiking. And one of the best things that anyone ever said to me on trail, I wish I could remember his. He had the funniest trail name, and I've lost it now. But we were sitting there talking, having lunch together at a water source, and he's like, "Oh, what's your name?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm Jim," and he's like, "Oh, I'm." Then he said whatever his trail name was, and he asked me if I had a trail name, and I don't have one, and he's like, "What do you do? Where are you coming from? Where were you last night?" And I was like, "Oh, last night I was like at my house. Like I'm just section hiking." He's like, "Stop right there." I was like, "What's?" He's like, "Never say just." He's like, "You're a section hiking, and that's awesome." He's like,
Heck yeah,
"Never ever say just." And I was
that's
like,
great.
"You know what? I'm removing that from my language from now on." And
I
it was just such a cool thing to have a through hiker be like, "Nope, stop right there. Don't say just."
Heck yeah, and that's the same way with Jay. And when they say that kind of thing, it feels like the next couple miles are just like that much lighter, and you're just kind of walking with a little bit bigger chest. You're like, yeah,
Yeah, for
man.
sure.
Yeah, I love it
And
when hikers build each other up like that instead of trying to like nitpick stuff. Like, just encourage. I think that's great.
absolutely. And I think, I talk about this a little bit in the intro to this video we're recording here, but um, I am a huge proponent of community, not competition. And I think that applies to um, YouTube. I don't view any of the other backpacking channels as my competition. They're my community, they're my friends. And I
Absolutely,
feel the same way when I'm on the trail. I'm not competing with anyone. It's not a matter of, oh, well, my base weight's lower than yours, or I walked 25 miles today and you only walked 15. Everything everybody's doing out there is awesome. I don't care if you hiked 5 miles in and set up your campsite, or if you did a 30 miler and have another 30 miler the next day, or if you're walking from Mexico to Canada. Everything everybody's doing out there, as long as you're respecting the areas that we're in and you're not trashing the environment, it's all awesome and it's all valid.
absolutely. Yeah, I have people in the store all the time, and they're like, "Oh, you're a much better backpacker than I am. I've only been out on one trip, and I only went like a mile." I'm like, "But you went that mile, man, and that's the first thing."
Yeah.
And so that's great. I love that. That was awesome.
Yeah, there's a young woman I've been following on TikTok recently. She's just gotten into backpacking. I can't think of her TikTok name right now. If I can remember it, I'll post it in the description here. But she's fantastic. She's such a great attitude, but she took a pretty nasty spill on the trail. She had a massive bruise that she showed on a TikTok video. And in the description of the video, she talked about it being a backpacking failure. And I was just immediately, I jumped on. I'm like, yo, you're still on the trail. Like, you're spending the night in a tent on the trail. You have not failed.
That's not a
Like,
failure. That's
don't,
a story.
yeah. Yeah, that's that's a thing that happened to you on trail. Like you didn't let it beat you. You set up your tent, you boiled your water for your dinner, and you stayed. So you did not fail. And I think that's such an important lesson, especially for new backpackers. Like, I mean, I've been doing this. I'm 50. I'll be 51 here in about 3 months, 4 months. I've been doing this since 2014, and the number of bruises and scrapes and spills, like I I
Scars.
couldn't I couldn't begin to count how many times I've just like randomly fallen on trail. And so it's not a thing that's limited to new backpackers, you know. It happens to the best of us. It
Yeah.
happens I don't care if you're a triple crowner, you've tripped and fallen on the trail, whether you admit to it or not, it's happened. And so
100%.
I think it's yeah, I think it's really important for new backpackers, especially to understand that, you know, not every day is awesome. Some days we're really tired. Like one of the last trips I took this summer was planned to be like this nearly 50-mile trip. I ended up going 30 miles because I was tired. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I don't see that as a failure. It was just a shorter trip than I planned. And I think I love that idea of just community over competition, and just like bringing people into the outdoor community and teaching them, you know, best practice, teaching them leave no trace and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that attracted me to your channel in the first place was you didn't hide those bad moments. You share those and you talk about them. And I've seen comments and people for you saying, "Wow, man, like it helps me so much to know that I'm not the only person who's gone through that." And I also try to do that. But like for me, um, the best channels and the best stories are the ones that include when things just don't go the way you want them to, because that happens so many more times than it doesn't.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, should we move on?
Absolutely.
All right. So my last question I thought would be I wanted to kind of end on something a little more fun, a little maybe a little silly, hopefully. Um, I think anyone who's been backpacking for a while or anybody who dreams of backpacking has kind of a bucket list of hikes that they want to do. I want to know what the third thing on your bucket list is and why.
This surprisingly was the hardest one for me to figure out, because I haven't really actually sat down and quantitated which ones because I just kind of poke them, and I always jokingly say my favorite trip is the next one I'm going on, and it's kind of a cliche answer, but really, in all honesty, it's like the next trip is wherever I'm. The trail is a trail. That being said, I did sit down and think about some of the things I wanted to do, and I have a couple big goals that I would like to do. And even after we got done talking about the difference between through hikers and non through hikers, I really would like to do the PCT if I had the opportunity. That's my big, probably not going to happen, but really want to kind of focus trip. And then my compromise of that one was the John Muir Trail, which would kind of be the second one. And right now, for me, in all honesty, the third route is actually something that I've created in my own little demented head. So I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but I work at a shop. I work at an outdoor shop here in Montana. And we have a lot of time to kind of just peruse maps and stuff. And so one day I pulled out the map and I wanted to see if I could create a long route in the Beartooth, because the longest that I've ever done in the Beartooth has been about a week. It was about 70 miles. We kind of stitched a couple trails together. And so I wanted to create a route that ran from the northernmost community on the Absaroka Range is Livingston, Montana. And then the southernmost city at the bottom of the Beartooth Range is Red Lodge. And the Beartooth Range sits just below the Absaroka Range. And I wanted to create a route that would kind of go across those two ranges, which are now commonly referred to as the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. And so I did, and I created this route using existing trails, and it's 165 miles.
Oh wow.
My buddy and I are planning on doing it, and it's going to take us about 2 weeks in theory. We have a stop in a small community called Cook City, which is this really cool little. I mean, if you ever go there, it's exactly what you would expect a little mountain town that time kind of forgot looks like. So and it's in the heart of grizzly country, so there's no camping around there. So we're going to actually stay at a hotel and just kind of treat it as like a 0 day almost. But I have just become engrossed in the idea of doing this trail because I don't think anybody has actually done this particular route as one whole thing. And the idea of a challenge is very enticing. We were thinking about doing it this year. However, due to the flooding that happened last summer, part of that trail is still closed. So we have to wait a little longer. But yeah, it doesn't have a name. I kind of jokingly started referring to it as the Absaroka Beartooth Long Trail, or ABLT for short. BLT,
Well done. Well done.
but yeah, we'll see. So it's a very odd answer, but there's other ones. It was so hard because there's so many different things that I want to do. You and I have talked about. I really want to get down and do some hiking in your area and do some hiking with you, and those are definitely up there as well. Yeah, it was a hard question to answer. It shouldn't have been, but it was.
It was kind of meant to be hard. That's why I didn't ask you what your first one was.
Yeah, low hanging fruit and all.
I don't have much to add to that because I'm not familiar with the area that you're talking about hiking, but it sounds cool, and I can't wait to see the videos.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think it's going to be really awesome. It could also be really terrible. I don't know. I have hiked some of the trails that are involved before. About half of it I've already hiked. The first half is going to be a complete mystery to me. So unfortunately, I was able to talk somebody else into this madness to go with me. So his Hot Pants is his trail name. He's been on
Oh,
trails
okay.
before. He did the trail with Phantom and I when we did Bighorns. So yeah, it's kind of a obscure answer, but it is what is keeping me awake at night. It's what keeps me poring over maps and calculating mileage.
Nice. I dig it. My buddy Brian and I do a lot of those kind of trips where he has this knack for looking at a map of an area, especially like a popular area like Yosemite, for example, and he'll pick the spot that has nothing. Like there's no trails, there's no roads, there's no anything. He's like, that's where we're going. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's where we're going. All right. And honestly, they've been some of the best trips. Like my favorite trip from 2022 was the Bear Lakes Basin.
Gorgeous.
Oh, it was absolutely, and I had some amazing trips. Like I did the Lost Coast Trail, I did the Timberline Trail, but Bear Lakes was just magical. There was something so special about it. Um, we saw like absolutely pristine alpine lakes that hardly anybody gets to see, and so those kind of like choose your own adventure trips, I think, end up being some of the best.
Yeah. Yeah, the videos in that one, that's one of my favorite videos because there's just some shots that are just, I mean, just absolutely stunning. And I can only imagine how much more stunning they were in real life.
Oh yeah,
Like, you
it's
do,
so hard to capture that stuff.
yeah,
Like,
you do a great job, but like, I just know from my own experience, I'm like, man, if it looks that good on film, it's got to be like 10 times better in real life. So that's awesome. All right.
all
Well, I'll
right,
go ahead
last one.
up. And I also kind of did a little bit more of a kind of lighthearted, kind of just um, not really how do I put it? Kind of a thought, more of a thought thing, kind of a fictional type thing. But if you had the opportunity to hike in any of the eras of backpacking history, its early beginning in the 50s, the hippie return to nature of the 60s, growth and change in the 70s and 80s, and the height of popularity in the 90s, or the current phase of digital media fueled outdoor experiences of today, which would you choose and why?
All right, so I really like this question, and I think my answer is going to surprise you. Um, I choose right now. Um, and the reason why is because there are so many just exciting innovations happening in gear and in, I mean, we're seeing backpacks that weigh less than a pound. And every week it seems like there's, oh, well, now we're making tents out of this material. Now, Dyneema was the big thing 3 or 4 years ago, but now it's like, oh, but look at this is the Dyneema killer. Look at, here's the next thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. And I love, especially in the cottage brand industry of backpacks and quilts and things like that. I love like seeing people like get genuinely excited about the new thing, like watching you and I both just purchased Waymark packs, and watching them as a company be like, oh, check this out, we have this new material that we're going to use on the side pockets, we have this new material that we're going to use for the body of the pack, oh, we're doing this cool new thing with the internal frame. And then there's another company, Ultralight Sacks, who have just released like their first backpacking specific pack. And they're so like genuinely excited about the design and the materials and getting it out there to the public. And I love being able to watch all of that unfold. And I love being able to interact with these folks. And become friends with people who are leading the charge in innovation and just backpacking technology. So I think right now is the best time to be a backpacker.
Yeah. It might surprise you, but I have a very similar thought process in that, I have the advantage of having been there during the 90s. I started, about 94, I think was when I first went on my really first big backpacking trip and kind of experienced that in kind of the end there. But, for me, I love currently right now, again, a lot of the same things you said, just the innovation and the really pushing the limits of it. I think as a hobby is maturing, and it's really kind of, exploring those new things, but also being able to see how much more it's growing and how many more people are using it as a tool to explore, their public lands. And that's so much more important nowadays, because the more people have a reason to tangibly appreciate something, the more they're going to want to fight for it. And I think now more than ever, it's just so critical for us to be able to protect these public lands. And there's a bit of a fine line, because there's more people, you run the risk of loving something to death. But at the end of the day, if people don't love it, they're not going to want to fight for it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, it's really exciting. And then, two, for me, I love the fact that, there's a lot of old school backpackers out there that just scoff at the idea of technology and filming and all this stuff and all that. But I absolutely love, and why I got into this other hobby of YouTube and creating, is I love that stoke that it generates. Like, I love watching other people's videos and seeing their experience and then relating it to my experience. And then again, that community that's kind of grown from it. And so you just didn't have that back in the 90s. Like, it was like you had your trip, and then maybe sometimes you could like get on a forum after your, dial up internet connected, and before your mom kicked you off, she had to make a phone call. You might get like a little blurb here and there, but like the accessibility now for things is so great. And being able to kind of share some of those experiences. So, there are a lot of pluses and negatives to everything, but yeah, the stuff that's going on right now, and just being able to connect with those people, and the industry as well. For me, I got into the industry kind of late. I was always an avid backpacker, but I didn't get into the outdoor industry until about 7 years ago when I took this job. And it's also just really cool to see how the industry is changing. And you mentioned the cottage brands. And even though I'm in a different part of the industry, it is really, really cool to see these mom and pop kind of shops that are just really changing the outline of the hobby. And it's to the point now where these companies are taking notice of it, and it's shifting, and it's really kind of cool to see, because there's some really awesome companies out there that are just really pushing that limit, and some of these other companies are finally starting to realize that they're onto something, and that it's shifting, and it's kind of cool. I'm really excited to see where it's going to go.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've noticed too, like a lot of like kind of the bigger box brands, uh, designing shelters and packs and things that look very similar to a lot of the stuff that the cottage brands have been doing for, the last 5 or 6 years. And all of a sudden, like, oh, well, now, we're going to start using sil poly instead of sil nylon, or we're going to start using Dyneema. We're going to start, so you're seeing like Big Agnes and Marmot and all these companies like trying to play catch up with these mom and pop businesses. And I think it's awesome. Um, the the old punk rocker in me definitely wants the mom and pops to win. I'd rather see 100, Durston tents or Z-Pax tents on the trail than 5 Big Agnes tents. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
nothing against Big Agnes. They make a perfectly fine product, but
Yeah.
I definitely would rather see, like the thing that I love about the Waymark pack that I have currently is that the person who assembled my pack and I have hiked together twice.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so like there's this real human connection, and because of that, I have this sentimental attachment to the pack, and I'll never get rid of it. I might add other packs to my quiver, but that pack is my pack because my friend assembled it for me, and that's not something you can get if you just go into an REI or into a shop like yours and grab something off the rack. And the other thing with, especially with backpacks, I think to a lesser degree with quilts, or sleeping bags, whatever your preference is, but my pack is my pack. Like it's built to my measurements and to my specifications. And if I had like an Osprey pack or something like that, I could loan that out to a buddy because they're adjustable in like a billion different ways. But that Waymark pack is my pack
Right.
that fits me. It was built specifically for me. And that's awesome. I love having something like you and I may have the same model, but your pack is your pack and my pack is my pack, and we can't like trade them because we're different sized people.
Yeah. And that's also so much important too. And again, another thing that you're starting to see a lot more of in this day and age of backpacking is inclusivity of different people and different body shapes, different things like that. And I think the cottage brands are really leading with a lot of that. Not only in the way that they, do their workforce and stuff, but also like for me, I'm not a small guy. I'm a plus size hiker, and I, as much as I hate this because I sell the packs, a lot of these companies are now going to a different model where it's easier to manufacture by only putting them in 2 different sizes and then creating all these adjustability, and you never
Right.
get really good dial. Whereas the cottage brands are really onto something because yeah, you might have to wait a little longer, but that pack is yours. It's made for your body, and you're going to get a good fit. And you know what? If you don't fit that stereotypical, 20-year-old um, you know, uh, built, white dude or whatever that's, the stereotypical black backpacker, they're going to be able to make a pack for you that is going to fit your standard. And I think
Yeah.
that's really cool because now, and also sleeping bags that are different shapes and stuff. And so it's so much more easy because I think we as a community are starting to realize that there's a lot of different people of a lot of different backgrounds with a lot of different shapes and sizes, and they're all part of this community, and they're all welcome, and they need to be welcomed. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to make it easy for them to enter into it, and then you have to have gear that you can use. And so
Yeah.
these cottage companies, I think they are the best set to lead that charge, and I think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of close it out, just sort of another anecdotal story. So I've been talking with Ultralight Sacks because I'm very interested in their new pack. It's the first. Most of their stuff is geared towards the climbing community, and they make an amazing quality product. Some of their bags have been up on Mount Everest, and now they're finally dipping into actual backpacking. And their focus right from the start was the weekend warrior. Like their packs obviously perfectly suitable if you want to do a through hike, if you're doing the JMT or the PCT or what have you. But their primary goal was to make something accessible for the weekend warrior. And I read the story about it on Garage Grown Gear, and I just love the idea. And just by happenstance, on my way driving home from Utah, I saw their van in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And so
Well,
I jumped on Instagram and I'm like, yo, I just saw your van. And we started this dialogue. And I emailed them. I was just like, hey, I'm interested in this new backpacking pack, but the sizes that you have listed online won't work for me. I'm bigger than your biggest size. And Luke, the owner, founder of Ultralight Sacks, got right back to me and he's like, yeah, man, just tell me what you need and we'll just make one. I was like, see, like that, you're not going to get that from Osprey. You're not going to get that from any of the other, the bigger pack makers. They're just going to be like, these are the sizes we have. They work for you or they don't. And it was just so cool to not only know this person's first name, but to have him just go, yeah, just tell me what you need. I'll just make it.
yeah. Well, yeah. Like today, I would not have any of those companies. I would have not gotten a personal photograph and a message from, the guy that runs the company saying, "Hey, man, your pack's done. We're going to mail it out tomorrow."
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it also made me even more impatient, but that's a whole nother story.
Right. All right. Well, I think we covered a lot of good ground. We've gone for just about an hour. I think
Yep.
that's probably good enough. Let people go off and watch some other videos. So thanks for doing this. We do have some other collaborative videos planned for the future. We'll see what happens with those. But thanks so much for doing this. And we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely, man. It was great fun. Thanks for having me on.